Welcome to Taking a Look. My name is Pete Jackson and I'm the Vicar of St Andrew's Church in Barnsley. Taking a Look is just a chance to find out what the Christian faith is really all about. In 5 short sessions, only about 12 minutes each, you'll discover who Jesus is, what he has done and why, and how we should respond to him. You could watch all 5 together, but you may prefer to watch them over 5 days or longer. It's entirely up to you. In each session, I'm going to read some verses from the Bible and speak about them for a few minutes. The reason for looking at the Bible is that my opinions are no better than anyone else's. So we're going to look at the Bible and see what God says. Let's get started with the first session, the God we can all know. I wonder if you've noticed how easy it is to get people wrong. There have been a number of contestants on The X Factor and Britain's Got Talent whom the judges and audience have instantly written off. As Simon Cowell saw one act coming onto stage, he famously rolled his eyes and whispered to his fellow judges, "Just when you thought things couldn't get any worse." But his eyes nearly popped out of their sockets when he heard them sing. That act is now world famous. I reckon that is what many people do with God. They sort of roll their eyes and presume that he must be a waste of time, but he's not. He's world famous. And the amazing thing is, we can know him. People are usually known through their words and actions. We all speak and do things, and those words and actions tell others who we are and what we're like. Well, it's the same with God. God has spoken and done things, and that means that he can be known too. Well, let's start at the very beginning to see what God has said and done and what we can know about him. The first book of the Bible is called Genesis, and it begins like this. Genesis chapter 1, verses 1 to 5. In the beginning, God created the heavens and the earth. Now the earth was formless and empty. Darkness was over the surface of the deep, and the Spirit of God was hovering over the waters. And God said, "Let there be light," and there was light. God saw that the light was good, and he separated the light from the darkness. God called the light day, and the darkness he called night. And there was evening, and there was morning, the first day. The Bible begins by telling us that God created the heavens and the earth. Basically, God created everything and everyone. Everything in the heavens, like the stars and the planets, everything on the earth, like the mountains and the oceans, the really big stuff, but also the really small stuff, like atoms and beer and football, and he made us too. At the very least, it tells us that God is extremely powerful. But it tells us something else too. If you make something from your own resources, then you are in charge of it. If I make a paper aeroplane, I'm in charge of it. I can keep it for myself, I could give it away, or I can screw it up and throw it away. You see, I made it, so I'm in charge of it. It's the same with God. He made the heavens and the earth. He made everything and everyone. So he's in charge of everything and everyone. We mustn't imagine that God is a daft old man with a long white beard sitting on a cloud. He's not. He's the almighty and powerful creator of everything and everyone, including us. But did you notice that he's not just a creating God, he's also a speaking God? In fact, that's how he did his work of creation. Genesis chapter 1 verse 3 says, "And God said, let there be light, and there was light." If we were to read the rest of Genesis chapter 1, we'd see that God spoke like that 5 more times to create things, and it all happened just as he said. The first few words of the Bible, then, tell us that God can be known by what he has done through looking at his creation, but also because he is a God who speaks. He speaks, and creation obeys. It tells us that he is in charge and supremely powerful. So he's a creating God and a speaking God, but God has also made himself known in another way, by actually coming into the world so that we may know him personally. Let's see that next from Colossians chapter 1. Colossians chapter 1 verses 15 and 16 say this: Jesus is the image of the invisible God. For by him all things were created, things in heaven and on earth, visible and invisible, all things were created through him and for him. That's why Christians take Jesus so seriously. He is the image of the invisible God. He is the one responsible for all that creating that we're told about at the beginning of the Bible. By him, all things were created, things in heaven and on earth, visible and invisible. All things were created through him. People often ask me how we can know that God exists. I always ask them who they think Jesus is. Sadly, many people never give Jesus a second thought, or they draw the wrong conclusions about him without ever having looked at the evidence. That's why it's a brilliant thing that you're doing, taking a look. You'll be able to make an informed decision having taken a proper look. Jesus showed very clearly that he was God who had come into the world. He healed the sick, he raised the dead, and as our last Bible reading demonstrates, he also showed his power over all creation. Mark chapter 4 verses 35 to 41 is on your screen, and it says this: That day, when evening came, Jesus said to his disciples, "Let's go over to the other side of the lake." Leaving the crowd behind, they took him along just as he was in the boat. There were also other boats with him. A furious squall came up, and the waves broke over the boat, so that it was nearly swamped. Jesus was in the stern, sleeping on a cushion. The disciples woke him and said to him, "Teacher, don't you care if we drown?" He got up, rebuked the wind, and said to the waves, "Quiet, be still." Then the wind died down, and it was completely calm. He said to his disciples, "Why are you so afraid? Do you still have no faith?" They were terrified and asked each other, "Who is this? Even the wind and the waves obey him." Can you imagine standing on the beach at Blackpool or Skegness or Great Yarmouth in the middle of a great storm? The sea is raging, the waves are crashing ashore, the wind is making it difficult to stand up. Well, now imagine being out in that storm on a small fishing boat. It would be terrifying. That's the scene here, and Jesus' disciples are understandably terrified. They think they're about to die. Incredibly, Jesus was sleeping through it, which alone should tell us that there was something different about him. But having been woken by his friends, we're told that he got up and basically told the wind and the waves to pipe down and shut up. Now, people would think we were mad if we tried it. But when Jesus spoke, the wind and the waves immediately died down, and it was completely calm. You see, it was a drop in the ocean for the one who made the ocean. And Jesus' friends, who at first were terrified of the storm, are now terrified of him. I bet they were. Look at what verse 41 says. They were terrified and asked each other, "Who is this? Even the wind and the waves obey him." That is a great question. Who is this? Who is it that has such awesome power? Well, the beginning of the Bible tells us that when God spoke, creation obeyed. Here we see that when Jesus spoke, creation obeyed. Who is this? Surely he is the Creator God who had come into his world. When God finished creating everything, we're told that he saw that it was good. It was like a new telly. Everything worked perfectly. People related both to God and each other in the right way. There were no arguments or fights. But you don't need me to tell you that the world is not like that now. The world is full of bad things, broken relationships, sadness, sickness, and pain. What on earth has gone wrong? We'll find out next time. Do take a few moments to think about what you have heard. It may help to consider these few questions. How or what do I think about Jesus? Has anything I've heard today surprised me? If Jesus is God, the one who made everything and everyone, how should I think about him and relate to him? If you'd like to ask a question about what you have just heard, feel free to email takingalook.help@gmail.com and one of us will get back to you. And if you'd like to, you could include your address or just your postcode, as there may be someone or a church local to you who may be best placed to help. Next time, we'll think about why our world and lives are in such a mess.